Well, guten Morgen, Genossen und Genossinnen, and welcome back to East Berlin, Ost-Berlin. And in a sense, welcome back to the German Democratic Republic, or Deutsche Demokratische Republik. Yeah, it's been gone for almost 34 years, but actually the socialist aesthetics still continue to exist here on this side of the city. So I think what we'll do today is actually just take a little walk around. We'll look for some Marxist mosaics, maybe Marxist murals, and some Leninist landmarks as well. Not sure that we're going to find any Lenin necessarily, but the others I think we'll manage to achieve. Anyway, join me. I think it's going to be a great day here across the former East Berlin. Well, this is probably the second most iconic landmark in all of Berlin, and the main one that really represents the former GDR or East Germany. The Fernsehturm goes back to 1969. It was actually opened for the 20th anniversary of East Germany as a country, and at the time, believe it or not, it was the fourth tallest structure in the world. I gotta say, what's pretty fascinating about where we are now, number one, it's called the Marx Engels Forum, and this is more or less exactly the way that it would have looked in the final years of the GDR. However, it hasn't looked like this in recent times until, I think it was last year, maybe the year before. Basically, these statues of Marx and Engels used to be in the park, but basically kind of tucked away in the corner. Well, these slabs don't look like much from afar, but get up close to them and there's a lot of images here. It looks reasonably incomplete, but a lot of images representing the international workers' movement and also national liberation struggles all around the world, Asia, Africa, Latin America. I mean, you have images of Ho Chi Minh, for example, Fidel Castro, so definitely underscores the internationalism that the German Democratic Republic had pursued. Somebody has slightly defaced the slab over here that says Ho Ho Honecker. Erich Honecker was the leader of East Germany from 1971 to 1989. You can see the sign here that says Nikolai Viertel, the Nikolai Quarter, and then Berlin Stadt des Friedens, the City of Peace. And this is actually an old East German sign, well, from 1987. And in fact, the entirety of the Nikolai Viertel was reconstructed for 1987, for the 750th anniversary of Berlin as a city. There were big celebrations in the west and in the east, and actually the big, you could say, major monumental project that the East Germans undertook was to reconstruct the historic Old Town. This is more or less where Berlin started as a city back in the year 1237. There's my man Karl again, making multiple appearances in this neighborhood, as you would expect. Long live the social revolution. Well, check out the old royal palace, sort of. It's definitely not old, and actually what gives that away is the fact that if you look around, there's no hint of bullet holes, war damage, smoke damage, anything like that from World War II. So I'll tell you a little bit about the story of where we are. So look, this used to be where the royal residence was, and actually a lot of what you see here has been done to scale of the original. The thing is, in 1950, the new East German government decided to destroy, to raze to the ground, bulldoze, get rid of the old royal palace, because frankly they didn't need it anymore. And then they constructed something very different here. They actually built the Palast der Republik, or the Palace of the Republic. Now, this opened in 1976. It was actually the East German Parliament, sort of. I mean, inside of it was the Volkskammer People's Chamber. That was the East German Parliament. But it also housed a bowling alley, cinema, restaurants, a lot of things for families to do. So a lot of East Germans have very fond memories of the old Palast der Republik because it wasn't merely a government building. Three images on display here within the palace grounds, the new palace, and actually the top one, that's the old Palace of the Republic, and that's a demonstration leading up to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The second one actually shows you more or less the surrounding area in 1918. You know, there was uncertainty about whether the moderate social democrats, the reformists, or the more radical communists would actually win out after the German Revolution. And then the third image, well, it's obviously not a photo. You have the 1848 revolution, the barricade set up here in the streets of Berlin. Well, inside of the Berliner Schloss actually sits something known as the Humboldt Forum, which you could say is a bit of a museum of the world. Well, just making my way out of the gift shop here at the Berliner Schloss, well, really the Humboldt Forum, and super interesting because you can actually buy a ceiling lamp from the old Palace of the Republic for 3,895 euros. Well, let me just say one thing about the reconstructed palace. It was a very controversial decision to reconstruct it. And one of the reasons is because, well, it cost 590 million euros, so not exactly chump change, especially for a city like Berlin, which has historically been referred to as poor but sexy. Not sure if you knew that. Anyway, so, also because a lot of East Germans, they have very fond memories, or had fond memories, of coming to the old Palace of the Republic, and actually a lot of my older neighbors were not exactly enthused by this when it opened. Do you see this orange line? This orange line has not actually been here for long, but what it represents is where the Palace of the Republic, the Palast der Republik, used to be. So it's part of a virtual exhibition, and I'll actually show you the sign for it in a little bit. We'll check out the old State Council building of the GDR. And the thing is, the majority of the building looks exactly the same, except for the entrance, which looks a little bit like the palace. And yeah, that's actually because in 1918, when the German Revolution took place, Karl Liebknecht proclaimed the Free Socialist Republic of Germany from this very building. Well, not this building that we're looking at, but from the balcony of the palace. And actually, when they were demolishing it in 1950, the East German government decided to keep one part of the old palace, the balcony where Liebknecht proclaimed the Communist Republic from. Well, check it out. We are now inside of the old State Council building of East Germany. Nowadays, a business management school, go figure. But check out the artwork here. Well, this memorial is actually from 1981, so it's from the GDR era, and it commemorates Herbert Baum and his group, who led an attack on a Nazi propaganda exhibition here in 1942. That exhibition was called Soviet Paradise, and it was trying to whip up support in Germany for the Nazi German invasion. Well, check it out. Tell me if you can spot my boy Carl behind me once again. The old Presse Café, or the Press Cafe. That's an easy one to figure out in English. But yeah, basically the mural that we're looking at here, this has only been visible once more to the public for, I want to say, the last 2 years, if that. In fact, for years it was covered over with an advertisement for a tapas or a steakhouse, I can't remember which. But basically it's been restored very, very nicely, and actually the entirety of the Presse Café is going to reopen as well, although I think it's going to be something slightly different than it used to be back during the East German period. Well, the Burger King here at Alexanderplatz is certainly not from the GDR, but the hotel is. The iconic Stadt Berlin Hotel, the City Berlin Hotel, nowadays still used as a hotel, operated by Radisson as a Park Inn. So this Galleria department store, which nowadays is still super popular, I mean, they're closing a lot of the locations all around Germany, but back in the day it was also a department store during the GDR period. It used to be the Centrum Warenhaus, and I actually have memories because, well, this is a whole nother story, but basically as a little kid, I lived in West Berlin, and we used to go back and forth across the Berlin Wall, come over to the east, and I have some memories of coming here to buy old East German toys and things like that. You know, Alexanderplatz used to be even more open back in the day than it is today because they put in a new building just a few years back. But this fountain, the Fountain of People's Friendship, done by Walter Womack, and very iconic, a meeting place for a lot of people when they actually come here to this part of the city. And the iconic Weltzeituhr, or the world clock, also like the TV tower from 1969, part of that massive project for the entirety of the area, but especially Alexanderplatz itself. And yeah, you can see that you have a lot of cities all around the world that are represented here. Also, this represents, in a sense, East German internationalism. Once more, it was, of course, a very important country in terms of the support for Global South movements, anti-colonial movements, national liberation movements, etc. And there's the absolutely iconic mosaic known as Our Life on the House of the Teacher. This dates back to 1964. The artist also, Walter Womack, he has so much to do with the area and basically the artistic life, you can say, here in the former East Berlin. And yeah, it consists of 800,000 pieces, so absolutely colossal. Across the street it says FitX, and that's actually an ad for a gym which is at the base of the building, but that's the old House of Travel. Walter was certainly busy back in the day, also responsible for this amazing piece. Well, this isn't the main monument to Ernst Thälmann in East Berlin. I think we'll save that one for another video. But nonetheless, one of them, and very close to Alexanderplatz as well. Now, Thälmann, of course, was the leader of the Communist Party of Germany, killed in 1944 in Buchenwald by the Nazi regime. Well, I think it would be really impossible to do a video about the socialist aesthetics of the former East Berlin without coming here to the Karl Marx Allee, or Karl Marx Avenue, which was actually the primary reconstruction project in the former East Berlin, or at that time you could say the Soviet sector of occupation after World War II. The project really gets underway from 1952, and actually the part of the boulevard that we're on, most of these buildings were constructed in the 1960s, so sometimes it's known as Karl Marx Allee 2. And initially the street was known as Stalin Allee, or the Stalin Avenue. That changed starting in 1961, when actually the street was pretty unceremoniously renamed in the middle of the night, and actually they tore down a Stalin statue. Ah man, a bit of a shame. The Kino International, the iconic cinema of East Germany dating back to 1963. You can see the sign, it says there will be an intermission. It's just actually closed in the last week for roughly the next 2 years. The good news is it's supposed to reopen again, I think in, well, 2026. But anyway, would love to have shown you around in there. Pretty iconic because the old East German film studio DEFA, all of their premieres would have happened here, a lot of the red carpet events, things like that. And still, like I said, a functional cinema until last week. So this part of the Karl Marx Allee is really known for these prefabricated apartment blocks, Plattenbau, they would be called in German. So, you know, the fundamental character of this street is not supposed to change. In other words, it's historically protected. And that means that you actually have some advertisements here from the socialist period from fraternal countries. So in this case, Bulgaria, Balkan Carpodem. Not sure if that company still continues to exist. I would imagine if it does, it's probably no longer state-owned. But yeah, pretty fascinating. I mean, the ads still continue to be here, what, 34, almost 35 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall? Well, it's election season here and across the European Union, and technically Die Linke, or the Left Party, is the successor to the Socialist Unity Party, the ruling party of East Germany. Well, the Salon Babette nowadays is a bar. It's open not very often at all, unfortunately, but this used to be, I believe, a hair salon or maybe a nail salon. I might be getting that wrong, but nonetheless, during the East German years, it was used for something very, very different. And here we have the iconic Café Moscow, opened in 1964. So again, a lot of this street opened around that period of time. 1963, 64, I think my building, 1967. And yeah, basically the most iconic thing about it is the mural representing the diverse, multinational Soviet people. Well, check it out. On the right-hand side, you can see one of the iconic Plattenbau buildings, again from the 1960s. On the left-hand side, you can actually see one of the buildings associated with the original Karl Marx Allee, or at that time Stalin Allee, so from the 1950s. And I think what we'll do is actually at some point dedicate an entire video to the construction of Karl Marx Allee, so I think we'll leave the original part of the street for a later time. Well, everybody, I think that's going to do it from the old East Berlin, at least for today. And I say that because, well, I live here, so if you want more videos and more detailed information looking at the history of both East Berlin and the old German Democratic Republic, let me know. This is just a little something to hold you over until our next travels. Speaking of which, I'll see you next time, very soon, from another location here in Europe. All will be revealed soon enough. All right, stay tuned.